I'd approach this as a murder inquiry. Silence is a rare commodity among three accomplices when $1 million remains untouched and abandoned. He had a calculated motive for infiltrating that specific household. The resulting carnage suggests a targeted strike rather than a random act. This bears none of the hallmarks of a standard abduction. There is a profound dissonance in the evidence, a fact not lost on the Bureau. Anomalies multiply regarding the events within Nancy Guthrie's residence, specifically when scrutinizing the cold geography of the crime scene. Investigative dossiers indicate a conspicuous absence of any physical altercation or resistance. No tread impressions, no friction trails, no disturbed finishes. The environment lacks the signature chaos of a violent struggle. This prompts a chilling inquiry. Why employ violence against an 84-year-old woman if multiple subjects were present? A professional assessment suggests she could have been subdued without resorting to blunt trauma. Nevertheless, the forensic record currently fails to substantiate the presence of more than one perpetrator. To decode these anomalies, we consulted veteran forensic specialist Cheryl McCollum for a clinical breakdown. A specialist with deep case knowledge, she has voiced her clinical concerns previously. Her findings emphasize jarring inconsistencies, particularly within the grain of the surveillance tapes. Her analysis notes the subject's interaction with the floral arrangement was strangely methodical, bordering on the ritualistic. That minute gesture carries heavy psychological weight regarding the subject's underlying pathology. Next, we examine the hematology, the specific patterns of blood spatter used to reverse engineer the crime's mechanics. In this instance, the fluid dynamics suggest a narrative far grimmer than the official press release. Cumulatively, these factors imply a labyrinthine conspiracy, prompting a meticulous re-evaluation of every forensic scrap by our team. The internal forensics paint a convoluted portrait that defies simple explanation. Ignoring these complexities would be a dereliction. Official reviews by veteran field agents suggest 4 unique bloodstain signatures were identified, each acting as a silent witness to a different phase of the event. Initially, we see passive circular droplets deposited at a 90-degree trajectory. These resemble epistaxis markers. A secondary, high-velocity pattern follows, initially misidentified by the first responders as mere dripping. Conversely, alternative forensics suggest expirated blood from coughing, fundamentally altering our reconstruction of the victim's final moments. Positioned beneath that, agents logged a distinct contact transfer stain. Observation suggests a bloodied appendage struck the surface, leaving behind a partial, haunting handprint. Some likened the Rorschach-like shape to a psychological ink blot, its meaning shifting with the observer's perspective. These details are essential for mapping spatial movement throughout the crime scene. Further down, a sterile swipe indicates a contaminated object was dragged across a pristine surface. Synthesizing these 4 patterns confirms active mobility within the kill zone during the commission of the act. Yet, the most troubling aspect remains. Even with this technical data, the theory of multiple subjects persists, despite the forensic ambiguity clouding the objective truth. As we delve into the micro-evidence, the macro conclusions become increasingly unstable. The glaring absence of bloody footwear impressions is statistically improbable if a victim was coerced through the area. We should see a trail of tracks, particularly if multiple actors were operating in tandem. Yet, the documentation confirms 0 tread marks, 0 drag trails, and 0 abrasions on any surface. Total lack of physical resistance makes the interpretation of the hematology paramount to the case. In addition, 2 specific anomalies continue to haunt the investigative team. Those clinical blood signatures and the bizarre floral manipulation captured on the digital video. There is internal concern that premature leaks have poisoned the well, compromising the purity of the ongoing analysis. We remain focused on the physics of the scene. Those perpendicular droplets provide a roadmap to the truth. Several stains exhibit a crescent-shaped void, a signature of aerated fluid. This specific morphology points toward an oral or nasal source rather than a peripheral arterial wound. Precision in the details. This slight, imperceptible shift in data finally begins to tighten the timeline of those missing minutes. Regarding the final head count, the Bureau stays disciplined, keeping our assessment surgical and narrow. Sifting through the forensic debris, every marker we've recovered points toward a solitary, lone actor. A shadow caught lingering by the main threshold. A ghost documented during prior surveillance. Despite rumors of a complex conspiracy of many, the cold physics of the scene suggest a singular trajectory, one set of prints, one path, one ghost. At this juncture of our operation, the verified data crafts a rigid narrative, leaving little room for accomplices. The clinical paper trail tells us a story. Nothing suggests a second presence. 0 floor abrasions, no secondary scuffing, and absolutely 0 auxiliary footfalls found within the perimeter. We prioritize the clinical separation of hypothesis from raw, undeniable reality. Truth is dictated by the hematology, the geometry of blood spatter, and the deafening silence of missing forensic trace evidence. Digital eyes reveal a significant void. Had a team breached that space, the laws of probability dictate some visual proof would exist, be it via external optics, smart sensors, or peripheral motion detection surrounding the grounds. Yet, frame-by-frame analysis only yields one subject, with absolutely no secondary ghosts entering or exiting the frame at any time during the breach. That void forces a confrontation with the unknown. Where is the partner's footprint? Beyond the sight, we weigh the heavy psychological weight of the total, crushing silence. Conspiracies usually fracture. The more tongues involved, the harder it is to suppress the truth, especially when a massive financial bounty is left on the table. However, here, the phone stays silent. No informants, no leaks, and no one reaching for that financial payout, strengthening the profile of a lone wolf acting in total isolation. Constructing a behavioral profile from a site like this demands a cold, clinical methodology. Initial protocols demand environmental lockdown, tightening the net to ensure not one fiber is lost. We dissect the mechanics, the psychology of movement, and rhythm of intent, leveraging microscopic fragments to reconstruct the face of the perpetrator. Out of view, we adhere to a rigid doctrine where one misstep collapses the entire case. For seasoned field agents, the primary directive is always the absolute surgical isolation of the crime scene. Tape is just the beginning. We establish concentric rings of security to filter all access. An outer buffer zone is deployed, permitting support teams to orbit the site without ever tainting the primary hot zone or disturbing any latent prints left by the subject on the scene. Logistical discipline beyond the tape is equally paramount to the mission's integrity. Standard procedure places press at a distance, while mobile command anchors in a secure, opposing vector. The objective is surgical. Maintain order and eliminate any civilian congestion near the residence. Spectators or tails sometimes try to breach the perimeter during active sweeps, which threatens the chain of custody protocols and complicates our forensic integrity. Such interference threatens the chain of custody and compromises the purity of the investigation. Professional stoicism is required, balanced with a keen awareness of the victim's inner circle. We operate knowing every movement is under kin's lens, necessitating a quiet, respectful efficiency that preserves the dignity of the victim's grieving family. We eschew theatrics, opting for a low-profile approach that respects the gravity of the trauma. Next, we examine the temporal breach. Extended scene retention is vital when ingress and egress routes remain shrouded in digital ambiguity across various surrounding home surveillance systems. Premature breakdown is a sin. Vital micro-evidence slips through the cracks, obscuring the exact point of compromise or the precise escape vector used by the subject during their exit from the residential grounds. In a dossier bleeding with enigmas, these minute observations often provide the missing link, As we assemble the jigsaw, focus shifts inward, where the psychological pressure of the unknown mounts. Video forensics takes center stage. We must verify if internal optics captured the subject's cadence, the specific timestamps, and the lethal sequence of events inside the home. Concurrently, the master suite's state holds the key. Nancy Guthrie's extraction from her sleeping quarters suggests a violent and targeted displacement, forcing us to scrutinize the linen patterns looking for struggle tells, DNA transfers, or the chaotic shroud displacement common in targeted residential abductions. A critical failure point involves the temporal sequencing of this event. At what precise millisecond did the trauma manifest? Where exactly does the trail of hematological evidence originate? These forensic anchors allow our team to reconstruct the crime's architecture, layer by layer. Behavioral profilers are now scrutinizing the necessity of kinetic energy here. Why escalate to violence under these specific operational parameters? Our forensic assessment suggests total compliance could have been achieved without physical strikes. Subjugation does not require blunt force. This logic points toward a subject fueled by gratuitous hostility rather than tactical restraint. It suggests a psyche seeking dominance over simple results. Medical records confirm Nancy Guthrie had significant physical vulnerabilities. Active resistance was highly improbable, making the subject's aggression even more calculated. In standardized abduction profiles, dominance is typically established through mere presence. In this scenario, escalation was a choice, not a requirement. Yet, the biological damage tells a darker story. It shifts the narrative from tactical necessity toward cold, deliberate, and unnecessary intent. This nuance dictates how we profile the subject's pathology. Then, we hit the wall of chronology. Analyzing the forensic clock reveals a discrepancy. The subject occupied the target zone for an unusually extended duration of time. His dwell time exceeded the standard extraction window. This lag suggests a secondary agenda played out behind those closed doors during that gap. Evidence technicians highlighted a tactical-style pack carried by the suspect. Its specific payload remains a chilling unknown in our current inventory. The mere presence of organized gear implies a high degree of pre-operational planning and preparation. It forces us to ask how long this execution was rehearsed in his mind before he stepped onto that porch. The chronological data is screaming. It deviates sharply from every established criminal behavioral pattern we see in professional abduction cases. Correlating the subject's initial breach at the entrance with the exact moment the victim's digital footprint vanished reveals a massive discrepancy. That temporal void is impossible to ignore. It represents a duration far beyond the standard signature of a quick extraction. Usually, these strikes are surgical. Entry, acquisition, and exit are typically completed within a 3 to 5 minute window. In this instance, the clock didn't just tick, it lingered. We are not talking about a matter of seconds or a couple minutes. The time spent inside reached a threshold that suggests the suspect felt a strange sense of comfort or followed a deeper purpose. This anomaly forces us to reconsider the entire nature of the crime. His exterior behavior only deepens the psychological mystery of this case. There is a haunting lack of adrenaline. He stalks toward the threshold with a casual, almost rhythmic lethargy, showing zero urgency. He pauses to scan the lateral glass, methodically verifying the interior conditions of the home before making his move. Observe the peculiar digital manipulation near the lens, a specific, curved configuration of the hand that defies any known tactical logic. It failed to obscure the visual field and lacked any functional utility. It is an idiosyncrasy that demands a behavioral explanation from our team. His manipulation of objects and the specific deployment of his illumination tool strike our analysts as highly atypical for this type of subject. Note the weighted pack on his person. Its contents are a mystery, but its volume suggests he came prepared for more than a simple exit. At one point, he diverts his beam toward the earth, scanning the terrain as if looking for a specific marker or dropped item. These combined behaviors paint a portrait of a man in total control, yet operating outside the bounds of conventional criminal psychology. The most profound deviation from logic occurs right at the primary entry point. It is a moment that leaves even seasoned profilers baffled. Upon reaching the residence, the subject engages in a bizarre and seemingly pointless interaction with the local flora. He meticulously dismantles the foliage, shredding leaves before returning to the surveillance device to stage the debris in front of the glass. This is a psychological red flag. The act did zero functional damage to the equipment, serving no purpose for concealment or evasion. This creates a massive investigative hole. If anonymity was the goal, he ignored a dozen more efficient ways to achieve it. Our field agents noted multiple heavy tools within arm's reach that could have permanently neutralized the camera feed in 1 second. He bypassed those logical choices. Instead, he chose a ritualistic, almost obsessive focus on these minor organic distractions with the flowers. We are looking at a decision-making process that completely abandons pragmatism for something far more internal and deeply disturbing. Every behavioral review reaches the same conclusion. We are dealing with a profound and consistent deviation from the professional norm. His grip on tools, his approach to the portal, and his blatant disregard for facial exposure all contradict standard criminal operating procedure. The consensus among our weapons experts is that the involvement of the handgun feels fundamentally misplaced in this context. The tactical positioning is flawed. The floral interaction is bizarre. Individually, these are quirks. Collectively, they form a mosaic of a fractured motive. Then, the macro-level questions emerge for the team. What was the primary objective of the extraction? Why has there been a total blackout regarding any demands or communication? Why vanish without a trace or a statement? These informational voids make this file nearly impossible to slot into a standard category. The subject is writing his own rules, and until we decode that personal logic, the truth remains buried in the psychological static. The psychological profile remains a void. We keep circling the same question. What kind of soul is capable of such an act? It is no binary solution. The data suggests a contradiction too clumsy for a seasoned operative, yet too deliberate to be a mere crime of opportunity. Rather, everything points toward a targeted obsession. Breaking a reinforced perimeter usually requires heavy hardware and significant effort, which we do not see here. Scanning the frames, the subject never reaches for a kit or prying tool. This shifts the narrative entirely. The breach likely was not a forced entry at all. Rumors persist of shattered security lighting at the rear of the property, hinting at a tactical approach through the shadows, though the lab has yet to sign off on that officially. The crimson geometry on the porch tells a clearer story. We are looking at what appears to be the primary egress point. Analysis indicates the individual spent nearly 60 seconds lingering in that specific kill zone, an eternity when every tick of the clock increases the risk of detection. Synthesizing the data, we see an amateur driven by a lethal resolve. The absence of structural damage is the most significant clue. The grainy video captures a tentative hand testing the latch, hoping for a simple lapse in security. In these quiet suburbs, a false sense of safety often leaves deadbolts disengaged. That is likely how the monster walked right in. For now, we deal in hypotheses, tethering our investigative intuition to the cold reality of hard forensics. With every forensic re-examination of the threshold, the traditional theories of a standard home invasion begin to crumble under scrutiny. On-site inspections yielded 0 tool marks, no splintered wood, and no trauma to the primary entrance. While secondary perimeters are still being scrubbed, the sliding glass at the back shows no signs of a breach. That detail alone defies the profile of a professional thief or an experienced intruder. A specialist would have moved with surgical precision, minimizing exposure and time on site. They would be in and out in seconds. Instead, we see a lingering shadow, plagued by indecision and a chaotic psyche. If profit was the motive, there were low-hanging fruits everywhere. A quick snatch and grab would have sufficed. But a mobile device, medical aids, and an expensive timepiece were completely ignored. This was not a tactical operation. It was a psychological unraveling. We suspect the subject obsessed over the entry but lacked the mental fortitude for the aftermath. The prologue was rehearsed, but the climax was pure, unadulterated chaos. That cognitive dissonance births unpredictable violence. It is the hallmark of a mind losing its grip. We worry about the entropy of justice. When the initial trail grows faint, the momentum of the case bleeds out. But we do not quit. We simply shift to a more methodical, predatory pace. Protocol demands we treat every anomaly as a worst-case scenario. The reasoning is chillingly simple. Anticipate the darkness early, and you will not be blinded by it later. Those first 48 hours dictate the finish line. We are scrutinizing the initial response time, weighing whether the bureaucracy moved fast enough to catch the ghost. Had the sirens screamed with maximum intensity from minute one, elite tracking units and federal assets would have been on the ground before the scent vanished. Command decisions made in the first hour determine if the lab gets the evidence it needs to close the file. People throw the word cold around too loosely in these types of investigations. Officially, that implies a total dead end, no pulse, no movement, and no hope for a resolution. That is not what we have here. This investigation is breathing, albeit quietly, behind closed doors. The sequencers are still humming, breaking down genetic markers and DNA samples, while agents pound the pavement for fresh intel. Our eyes remain glued to the pixels of that surveillance loop. Take the subject's gear, the specific way it is slung, and the awkward weight of the load. Behavioral analysts see a profile of inconsistencies in those movements, suggesting equipment that was either bottom shelf or stolen, ill-fitted for a man of his stature. Field agents are tracing every transaction, hunting for any person who recalls these items to spark fresh investigative leads. Profilers are dissecting his movements and psychological footprint to estimate his age and the depth of his dark criminal history. The data points toward a younger subject, though we treat this strictly as a working theory rather than a verified fact. His operational tempo is what draws focus. The activity consistently strikes on weekends, suggesting a rigid, predetermined life routine. Does he have a rigid weekday obligation that keeps his darker side sidelined? We are pursuing several psychological angles to isolate the suspect and decipher the logic behind his specific temporal choices. This hunt moves forward. Questions are now intensifying regarding the suspect's identity and the tactical management of this hunt. One glaring element remains the specific calendar of his activity, which, landing exclusively on weekends, reveals a deep pattern. This weekend-only rhythm suggests a civilian facade during the week, which helps us narrow the profile of potential suspects. One minor clue. This detail becomes crucial as we dissect the timeline's anatomy. Simultaneously, a shadow of doubt grows over the perceived lack of transparency and communication currently surrounding this high-profile criminal investigation. Examining the specific data released for public consumption, profilers note the voids. The things left unsaid are often more telling than the evidence officially put on the record. Prolonged radio silence breeds public paranoia and wild speculation variables we desperately try to eliminate during any high-stakes, active criminal manhunt. One glaring issue is the lack of a unified front. In most major federal or local criminal investigations, law enforcement and the victim's circle stand as one, projecting a singular image of total, coordinated strength. In this specific scenario, that collective voice has been conspicuously absent from the official media narrative. Many believe a joint statement would rebuild public confidence, align the facts, and choke off the spread of rumors. Understand that the public is only seeing the surface of a deep operation. There are classified maneuvers and strategies in play that remain hidden, which is standard protocol for any ongoing hunt. Still, transparent and frequent updates are vital for community trust while we protect the sensitive integrity of the forensic evidence. We stay on the trail, analyzing every forensic heartbeat and verified whisper. We value your commitment to following this investigation. This has been your update. Stay sharp, stay vigilant. Let us keep moving toward the final set of truth. Proceeding with the briefing, let's analyze the current state of this investigation.